As I entered the house, I met the same man who gave me the money. I was scared and my heart jumped in my chest. I stuttered as I greeted him. He smiled at me and asked how I was. I asked him about Chidinma, and he said she was taking her bath. I thanked him for the money and wanted to leave, but he called me back and asked me to come to sit beside him. I was scared, but I went towards him and sat. He asked if I had a phone, which I told him I didn't. As we were talking, Chidinma came to him and saw me. She asked what I was doing, and I explained the reason for my visit. After a few minutes, both of them started talking about how beautiful I was and that I shouldn't waste my beauty like my sister. I told them I was scared of parties, but they advised me not to be. The man told me the same thing Chidinma does was the same thing he does. He hangs with sugar mummies and they give him huge sums of money and he doesn't even have to do anything with them, and they could teach me also how to do it safely. Chidinma advised me to follow them that day, and I skeptically agreed since they ensured my safety. I followed them to a club party that evening, and I discovered the lifestyle and how they earn money from the rich when I got back home late that night. I explained to my sister everything and she got very angry. I told her I could do the business without selling myself, and we got into a heated argument. She told me if I wanted to live that life, then I would have to sponsor myself from that night, and I agreed. Since then, I started following Chidinma to the parties and started making money for myself. I learned ways to prevent myself from being abused by rich men, and I became very good at it. I used many things like my psychopath, contacting their wives, and STD test results to prevent anything when the men started demanding for anything under my skirt, and I became very good. I was making millions every night party. My sister kept advising me, but I only showed her the money I was making and reminding her none of the men had touched me. Until that terrifying Tuesday night, as usual, Chidinma called me around 8 p.m., but I felt uneasy and tired, having feelings that didn't want me to go. She told me the wealthiest men in the state were coming to that certain exclusive party, and it would be multiple millions I would be taking home on a single day, so I reluctantly decided to follow her. We arrived at a very huge mansion and our Uber drove in. There we met fat, wealthy-looking men sitting on different large seats with a few dancers. Some things felt off about the party. It was tense and slightly quiet. It wasn't done in the usual way. As I and Chidinma walked in, a man suddenly called Chidinma, and she quickly ran to him. Sitting on his legs and waving to me, I was scared and anxious as I walked in, and before I could find an empty seat, a man suddenly pointed to me, gesturing for me to come towards him. I walked shyly, and he smiled, looking at me. I sat beside him and he continued smiling weirdly at me. "You look new here," he said, and I nodded fearfully. Then he started touching my legs while licking his lips. My heart was pounding heavily, but I couldn't do anything but smile. He stood and told me to follow him, which I fearfully did, turning to look at Chidinma, who was smiling at me. Before I knew it, we were in a room. We got inside and he locked the door immediately, which only made my heart beat even faster. This felt very scary for reasons I couldn't understand. He told me to take off my dress as he was losing his belt, and I smiled and acted professional and confidently. "You would have to pay before you see anything, Olga," I said, trying to force a smile, but he only stared at me eagerly. He told me he would do that when he was done, and I quickly came up with my other safety measures. I told him I would need to shower to make myself clean for him, and he agreed. I took out my fake HIV result and put it on the bed beside my bag and headed to the bathroom, hoping he would read it. I took my time while in the bathroom, and when I finally came out, I saw the paper torn to pieces on the floor and the man sitting menacingly beside the bed. "Even if you have HIV and Ebola, we are doing what we came here for," he said, and he pulled down his trousers, and what I saw made me scream like my life was about to end. A snake was in the middle of this man's leg, a living one which curled up by itself and hissed as it stared at me. I started screaming and running to the corners of the room, screaming on top of my lungs, but he only kept coming towards me. The snake also continued hissing and biting like it wanted to attack and eat me, and I started crying and begging for help. I was almost peeing on my body.